So you're sitting there scrolling through your credit card statement and you feel that little knot in your stomach. $8,000 in debt. Maybe it's $15,000. Maybe it's $30,000. And you remember what your parents told you, what every finance guru on the internet screams at you. Debt is bad. Debt will destroy you. Get out of debt as fast as possible. Meanwhile, Elon Musk has billions in debt. Jeff Bezos? Billions in debt. That real estate investor you follow on Instagram who just bought their 5th rental property? Also swimming in debt. And somehow, they're getting richer while you're losing sleep over your Discover card balance. What the hell is going on here? My name is Ryan, and I spend way too much time thinking about why we're taught to fear the exact same financial tool that wealthy people use to build generational wealth. If you're someone who's been told your entire life that all debt is evil, but you're watching rich people use debt to get richer, and you're wondering if you've been lied to this whole time, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Because here's the thing, you weren't entirely lied to. You were just told half the story. And that missing half, that's the difference between staying broke and building actual wealth. Look, let's start with something that's going to make you uncomfortable. The average American has about $104,000 in total debt, according to recent data from Experian. That includes mortgages, credit cards, student loans, car loans, everything. And we're told this is a crisis, that we're drowning, that debt is ruining America. But here's what most people don't realize. The average millionaire has way more debt than you do. Like, it's not even close. A typical real estate investor might have $2 million in mortgage debt across their properties. A successful business owner might have $500,000 in business loans, and they sleep like babies at night. So what's the difference? Why is your $15,000 in credit card debt keeping you up at night while someone with $2 million in debt is planning their next vacation? The answer is so simple it's going to make you angry. There's debt that makes you money, and there's debt that costs you money. That's it. That's the whole game. Now you might be thinking, so you're going to tell me about good debt and bad debt. I've heard this before. And yeah, you probably have. But I want to explain this in a way that actually makes it click, because most people know the theory, but they don't understand the psychology behind why one type of debt keeps you poor and the other makes you rich. Bad debt is debt you take on to buy things that lose value. Your car loses about 20% of its value the second you drive it off the lot. That new iPhone loses half its value in a year. Those clothes you bought on your credit card, worth basically nothing the moment you cut the tags off. But here's where it gets really interesting. It's not just that these things lose value, it's that they cost you money every single month while they're losing value. Let me show you the math that nobody shows you. Let's say you buy a $30,000 car with a 7% interest rate on a 5-year loan. Your monthly payment is about $594. Over those 5 years, you'll pay $35,644 total. That's $5,644 in interest. But your car? It's now worth maybe $15,000 if you're lucky. So you've paid $35,644 for something that's worth $15,000. You've literally lost $20,644 of wealth. That's bad debt. It takes money out of your pocket every single month, and the asset backing it up is evaporating. Now, good debt? Good debt is debt you take on to buy things that make you money. Real estate that generates rental income, a business that generates profit, an education that increases your earning power, assets that appreciate in value while paying you. Let's run the same math, but with good debt. You buy a $300,000 rental property with 20% down, so you're borrowing $240,000 at 7% on a 30-year mortgage. Your monthly payment is about $1,597. But here's the magic. You rent it out for $2,500 a month. After your mortgage payment, property taxes, insurance, and maintenance, you're clearing maybe $400 a month in cash flow. That's $4,800 a year of actual money hitting your bank account. But wait, there's more. That property is probably appreciating at about 3 to 4% per year historically. So in year one, your $300,000 property is now worth $309,000. You just gained $9,000 in equity you didn't pay for. And your tenant? They're paying down your mortgage principal every single month, building you more equity. After 5 years, you've collected $24,000 in cash flow, you've gained roughly $45,000 in appreciation, and your tenant has paid down about $25,000 of your loan. That's $94,000 of wealth creation on your initial $60,000 down payment, and you still own the property. That's good debt. It puts money in your pocket every single month while the asset grows in value. Here's what most people don't realize, and this is the part that's going to change how you think about money forever. Rich people don't see debt as something they owe. They see it as a tool they use. Think about it like this. When you buy a hammer, you don't lie awake at night stressed about the hammer. You don't feel guilty about owning a hammer. You don't tell yourself you need to get rid of the hammer as fast as possible. It's just a tool. You use it when you need it, and when you don't need it, it sits in your garage. That's how wealthy people view debt. It's a tool. When they can borrow money at 7% to invest in something that returns 12%, they're not stupid enough to say, "No thanks, I heard debt is bad." They run the numbers, they assess the risk, and if the math works, they use the tool. But here's the psychological trap that keeps most people poor. We've been conditioned to feel moral shame about debt. Like being in debt means you failed, like it's a character flaw. And that shame prevents us from ever learning to use debt as a tool. Look, I get it. If you're sitting on $20,000 in credit card debt from buying stuff you didn't need, you should feel uncomfortable about that. That's bad debt, and it's destroying your financial future. But the solution isn't all debt is evil. The solution is learning the difference. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, and this is the part that makes wealthy people wealthy. Rich people understand something about money that most people never learn. The cost of money changes based on what you're using it for. If you go to a bank and say, "I want to borrow $50,000 to buy a boat," they're going to charge you somewhere between 8 and 15% interest if they give it to you at all. Why? Because they know that boat isn't going to make you any money to pay them back. You're a risk. But if you go to that same bank and say, "I want to borrow $50,000 to buy a rental property that's generating $700 a month in cash flow," they're going to charge you maybe 7 to 8%. Why? Because they can see the property is making money. They can see you have a way to pay them back. You're less risky. And if you're really sophisticated and you say, "I want to borrow $500,000 to buy a commercial property with 10 established tenants on long-term leases, generating $8,000 a month in net income," they might charge you 6% or less. Why? Because now you're an even safer bet. This is the game. The more you can prove that the debt will make money, the cheaper the debt becomes. And the cheaper the debt becomes, the more money you can make with it. Let me give you a real example that's going to blow your mind. Let's say you have $100,000 saved up. You could buy a $100,000 rental property in cash. Let's say it generates $10,000 a year in net income. That's a 10% return on your money. Not bad. But here's what a wealthy person would do instead. They'd take that $100,000 and use it as down payments on 5 $100,000 properties. They'd borrow $80,000 on each property at 7% interest. Now they own $500,000 worth of real estate instead of $100,000. Let's run the math. Each property generates $10,000 a year in gross income, but now you're paying about $6,400 a year in mortgage payments on each one. So your net income per property is $3,600. Times 5 properties, that's $18,000 a year. You just almost doubled your income using debt. Plus, you're getting appreciation on $500,000 worth of assets instead of $100,000. And your tenants are paying down $400,000 worth of loans for you. That's leverage. That's why rich people love debt. Here's another concept that's going to change how you think about this. Wealthy people understand the velocity of money. They know that a dollar today is worth more than a dollar tomorrow, not just because of inflation, but because of what you can do with it. Let me explain. If you have $50,000 in student loan debt at 5% interest, the popular advice is to throw every extra dollar you have at that debt. Pay it off as fast as possible. Be debt-free. But here's what that advice is costing you. Let's say you can afford to pay an extra $1,000 a month toward that debt. You'd pay it off in about 4.5 years and save roughly $5,800 in interest. That feels good, right? You're debt-free, you saved money on interest. But what if instead you made the minimum payments on that 5% student loan and invested that extra $1,000 a month into the S&P 500, which historically returns about 10% per year? After those same 4.5 years, you'd have about $66,000 in your investment account. Even after accounting for the $5,800 you didn't save in interest, you're about $60,000 richer than the person who paid off their debt. Now, you might be thinking, what about the risk? The stock market could crash. At least paying off debt is guaranteed. And look, that's a fair objection. But here's what you're missing. Keeping that money liquid gives you options. If you lose your job, you have $66,000 to fall back on. If a great investment opportunity comes along, you have capital to deploy. If there's an emergency, you're covered. The person who threw everything at their debt, they have nothing. They're debt-free, but they're also broke. And if something goes wrong, they're going to end up right back in debt. But now it'll be high-interest credit card debt instead of a low-interest student loan. This is what I mean by the velocity of money. It's not just about the interest rate. It's about liquidity, flexibility, and opportunity cost. Here's the framework that wealthy people use to decide whether to take on debt or not. And this is the part you need to write down. First question, will this asset make me money? If yes, debt might make sense. If no, you better have a damn good reason. Second question, is the return higher than the interest rate? If you can borrow at 7% to invest in something returning 12%, that's a 5% spread. That's how you build wealth. Third question, can I afford the payments even if something goes wrong? This is the risk management part. Rich people don't overextend. They make sure they can weather a storm. Fourth question, does this debt give me leverage and flexibility? Sometimes debt makes sense even at a slight loss because it keeps your capital free for better opportunities. Let me give you a real-world example of this framework in action. A friend of mine had $200,000 sitting in savings. She was looking at buying a rental property for $400,000. She could either put down $200,000 and borrow $200,000, or she could put down the standard 20%, $80,000, and borrow $320,000. Most people would say put down more to borrow less, right? Pay less interest. But let's run the math using the framework. With the $200,000 down payment, she borrows $200,000 at 7%. Her monthly payment is about $1,331. The property rents for $3,200 a month. After all expenses, she's clearing about $800 a month. That's $9,600 a year on a $200,000 investment. A 4.8% return. With the $80,000 down payment, she borrows $320,000 at 7%. Her monthly payment is about $2,129. Same rental income, same expenses, but now she's clearing only about $100 a month. That's $1,200 a year on an $80,000 investment, a 1.5% return. On the surface, the big down payment looks way better, right? Higher cash flow, better return. But here's what you're missing. With the small down payment, she still has $120,000 in the bank. She can take that money and buy another rental property with an $80,000 down payment and have $40,000 left over for emergencies. Now she owns two properties generating a combined $1,900 a month instead of one property generating $800 a month. She's making more than double the income, and she's building equity in twice as much real estate. That's the framework in action. It's not just about the numbers on one deal, it's about the entire strategy. Look, here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people will never build wealth because they can't get past their emotional relationship with debt. They're so terrified of owing money that they'll never use it as a tool. And I get it, I really do. If you grew up watching your parents struggle with debt, if you've been burned by credit cards, if you've felt that stress of owing money you can't pay back, your fear is valid. But here's what I need you to understand. That fear is based on bad debt. The debt that costs you money, the debt that goes toward depreciating liabilities. And yes, you should be afraid of that. You should avoid that like the plague. But good debt? Good debt is different. Good debt is how a middle-class teacher buys a duplex, lives in one unit, rents out the other, and retires with $2 million in real estate equity. Good debt is how a 25-year-old with $40,000 in savings builds a $500,000 rental portfolio by age 35. Good debt is how immigrants with nothing build multi-generational wealth in a single lifetime. The shift you need to make is this. Stop asking, should I avoid this debt? And start asking, will this debt make me money? If someone offers you a loan at 6% and you can invest that money at 10%, you take that loan every single time. That's a 4% spread. That's free money. That's how wealth is built. So here's what you do. Here's how you start thinking like a wealthy person about debt. Step 1, audit your current debt. Make a list: credit cards, car loans, student loans, mortgages, everything. Write down the interest rate next to each one. Step 2, separate your debt into 2 categories: destructive debt, high interest, used for depreciating assets, and strategic debt, low interest, used for appreciating assets or income-generating assets. Step 3, create a plan to eliminate your destructive debt as fast as possible. Not because all debt is bad, but because this specific debt is killing you. Every dollar you pay in credit card interest at 24% is a dollar you can't use to build wealth. Step 4, once your destructive debt is under control, start thinking about strategic debt. Can you buy a rental property? Can you invest in your education to increase your income? Can you start a business? What assets can you acquire that will make you money? Step 5, run the numbers on everything. Don't take on debt just because you can. Make sure the math works. Make sure you can afford the payments. Make sure the asset is actually going to generate the return you need. And here's the most important part. Start small. You don't need to borrow $1 million tomorrow. Buy one rental property. Start one small business. Get comfortable using debt as a tool on a small scale before you scale up. Here's the thing that nobody wants to tell you. The system is designed to keep you afraid of debt so you never learn to use it as a tool. Because if everyone understood what I just explained to you, if everyone knew how to use debt to build wealth instead of destroy it, the game would change completely. Rich people don't want you to know this. Banks don't want you to know this. The entire financial system benefits from you being terrified of debt while simultaneously drowning in the bad kind of debt that keeps you poor. But now you know. Now you understand that debt isn't good or bad. It's neutral. It's a tool. And like any tool, it can build something amazing or it can hurt you if you use it wrong. Let me break this down even further because this is where most people get lost. When you take on debt to buy a liability, something that takes money out of your pocket every month, you're playing the game exactly how the system wants you to play it. That new car with the 5-year loan at 7% interest, that's not building wealth. That's transferring your wealth to someone else. The vacation you put on a credit card at 22% interest, you're literally paying double for memories while someone else profits from your desire for instant gratification. But here's what changes everything. When you use debt to acquire assets, things that put money in your pocket, you're playing an entirely different game. You're playing the game that wealthy people have been playing for generations. Think about it. When a real estate investor takes out a mortgage to buy a rental property, they're not just buying a house. They're buying a cash-flowing asset where tenants pay down the mortgage, cover the expenses, and still leave profit every single month. That investor is using the bank's money to build wealth. They're using leverage to amplify their returns. And here's the beautiful part. The tax code actually rewards this behavior. The system is set up to encourage wealth building through strategic debt use, but they don't teach you this in school. They don't teach you that mortgage interest on investment properties is tax deductible. They don't teach you that depreciation on real estate can offset your income. They don't teach you that business debt used to grow a profitable company can accelerate your path to financial freedom faster than saving alone ever could. Instead, they teach you to be afraid. They teach you that debt is always dangerous. They teach you to save every penny in a savings account, earning 1% interest, while inflation runs at 3%, which means you're actually losing money every single year. They teach you to avoid risk at all costs, which really means they're teaching you to avoid wealth building at all costs. Now, I want to be crystal clear about something because I know some people are going to misunderstand this message. I am not telling you to go out and rack up a bunch of debt tomorrow. I am not saying that all debt is good. What I'm saying is that you need to fundamentally change how you think about debt. You need to understand the difference between debt that enslaves you and debt that empowers you. Consumer debt, high-interest credit cards, car loans for vehicles you can't afford, personal loans for lifestyle expenses. This is the debt that destroys your financial future. This is the debt that keeps you trapped in the cycle of living paycheck to paycheck. This is the debt you should absolutely avoid or eliminate as quickly as possible. But productive debt, mortgages on cash-flowing real estate, business loans that generate more revenue than they cost, strategic lines of credit that allow you to seize time-sensitive opportunities, this is the debt that wealthy people use to build empires. This is the debt that can transform your financial trajectory if you understand how to use it properly. The difference is massive. One type of debt makes you poorer with every payment. The other type makes you richer with every payment. One type of debt funds consumption, the other funds production. One keeps you stuck, the other propels you forward. And here's something else they don't tell you. Inflation actually works in your favor when you have productive debt. Let me explain. If you take out a mortgage today for $300,000 at a 5% fixed interest rate, that debt stays at $300,000. But over the next 30 years, inflation erodes the real value of that debt. Meanwhile, the asset you bought with that debt, the property, likely appreciates in value. And the rent you collect increases with inflation. So you're paying back the loan with increasingly cheaper dollars while your asset becomes more valuable. That's not a bug in the system. That's a feature that wealthy people exploit every single day. Think about every major business you know. Amazon, Apple, Tesla, McDonald's. They all use debt strategically. They leverage other people's money to expand faster than they ever could with just their own capital. Jeff Bezos didn't build Amazon by saving up enough money to fund every warehouse. He used debt and equity financing to scale at a pace that created one of the most valuable companies in history. But here's the part that really gets me fired up. While wealthy people are using debt as rocket fuel for their wealth, the average person is being told that debt is the enemy. The average person is being sold fear instead of financial education, and that fear keeps them exactly where the system wants them, working harder, earning less, and staying dependent on a paycheck that barely covers their expenses. So the question is, what are you going to do with this information? Are you going to keep believing the lie that all debt is evil? Are you going to keep letting fear control your financial decisions? Or are you going to start thinking like a wealthy person? Are you going to start using debt as a tool to build the life you actually want? The choice is yours. But I can tell you this, every wealthy person you've ever heard of made their choice a long time ago, and they've been using debt to get richer ever since. Start small if you need to. Educate yourself on how different types of debt work. Learn about cash flow, about return on investment, about leverage ratios. Start looking at opportunities through the lens of whether they generate income or consume it. Build your financial intelligence before you take on significant productive debt. But don't let fear paralyze you into inaction. Don't let the system's programming keep you from building real wealth. The wealthy didn't get rich by accident. They got rich by understanding and using tools that most people are too afraid to touch. Now you understand one of the most powerful tools in their arsenal. The question is whether you're going to use it or continue playing the game by rules designed to keep you broke. If this video changed how you think about money, hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe if you want more content that actually teaches you how money works instead of feeding you the same tired advice that keeps people broke. And drop a comment telling me what you're going to do differently now that you understand this. I'm Ryan, and I'll see you in the next one.